I was so sure I had him, the suspicious old man in the fancy coat, out of place in Ridgemont's quiet luxury. But by the time his cuffs clicked shut, I had sealed not his fate, but my own. The crisp morning air bit at my cheeks as I took a long sip of lukewarm coffee. It was the tail end of my shift, that quiet gray hour before the city truly wakes up, and my rookie partner, Henderson, was already starting to fade next to me. We were cruising through the Ridgemont district, the part of town with manicured lawns, two-story colonials, and property taxes that could choke a horse. It was our cushy patrol route, a place where the biggest crime was usually someone forgetting to bring in their recycling bins. That's why I liked it. It was clean, orderly, predictable. Then I saw him. He was an old black man, maybe in his late 60s, walking slowly but with a purpose that seemed out of place. He wore a tailored charcoal gray coat, pressed slacks, and polished leather shoes. Too nice for a morning stroll. He was looking at the houses, one by one, his gaze lingering a little too long on each. My internal alarm, the one honed by 15 years on the force, started blaring. "Look at this guy," I muttered, nudging Henderson. 10 o'clock. Henderson squinted. "Just a guy walking, Miller." "No," I said, slowing the cruiser to a crawl. "Look at him. He doesn't belong here. He's casing joints. I can feel it." Henderson sighed, the sound of a kid who'd read the academy textbook but had never smelled a real street. "Miller, we can't just stop him for walking." "Watch me," I said, flicking on the lights. The sudden flash of red and blue slicing through the dawn mist made the man stop. He didn't flinch. He didn't look scared. He just turned and faced us with a look of mild annoyance, as if we were a bothersome fly. That ticked me off immediately. The innocent ones look scared. The guilty ones act indignant. I swung the car door open, the heavy thud echoing in the quiet street. "Morning, sir. Mind if I have a word with you?" I kept my voice level, the practice authoritative calm that I knew could unnerve people. He stood perfectly still, his hands resting on the silver head of a simple wooden cane. "Is there a problem, officer?" His voice was deep and resonant, each word pronounced with a clarity that surprised me. He sounded educated. That made him more dangerous. "Just wondering what you're doing in this neighborhood so early," I said, walking towards him, letting my hand rest casually on the butt of my service weapon. Henderson got out too, hanging back by the passenger door like the nervous rookie he was. "I'm taking a walk," the man said, his eyes meeting mine without a trace of fear. "A walk," I repeated, letting a little smirk play on my lips. "Right. See any houses you like? Picking one out for a future visit, maybe?" His expression didn't change, but a hardness settled in his eyes. "I live here, officer." I laughed. It just slipped out. "You live here?" "Sure you do, pal." "In which one of these $1,000,000 homes?" I gestured around us. "Let me see some ID." He shook his head slowly. "I don't believe I'm required to do that. I haven't committed a crime. I am simply walking down the street." That was it. The magic words. "Failure to identify," I snapped. "Now you're making this a problem. Put your hands on your head." "This is ridiculous," he said, his voice rising just a fraction. "You're profiling me, and you know it." "He's getting agitated, Henderson," I yelled, taking it as my cue. "Hands on your head now. Last chance." He started to reach into his coat pocket. My training kicked in. 1,000 scenarios flashed through my mind. A glint of steel. A desperate move. Me going home in a bag. I wasn't going to let some old thug get the drop on me in Ridgemont. I closed the distance in 2 steps, grabbed his arm, and slammed him against the hood of my cruiser. The cane clattered onto the asphalt. He let out a sharp grunt of pain, but he didn't struggle. "I told you," I snarled, twisting his arm behind his back. The metal of the cuffs clicked shut around his thin, wrinkled wrists. Henderson finally moved, looking pale and uncertain. "Miller, maybe we should just—" "Just what, Henderson? Let him go so he can come back tonight with a crowbar? Not on my watch." I patted him down, rougher than necessary. I found a wallet in his inside pocket and a set of keys. No weapon. I yanked the wallet out and flipped it open. "Let's see who you really are," I said, scanning his driver's license. The name read Marcus Williams. The address was just 2 blocks over, on a street I knew was nicknamed Millionaire's Row. It had to be a fake. I shoved him into the back of the car and slammed the door. As I got back in the driver's seat, I felt a surge of satisfaction. Another one off the streets. As we pulled away from the curb, a cold, quiet voice came from the back seat. "Officer." I glanced in the rearview mirror. His face was a mask of cold fury. "What do you want?" I grumbled. "When we arrive at the precinct," he said, his voice devoid of any emotion, "I need you to place a call for me. I won't be using my one phone call on this." I scoffed. "Oh yeah? Who are you going to call? The mayor?" He stared right into my eyes through the mirror, and a chill I couldn't explain crept down my spine. "No," he said, his voice dropping to a low, authoritative command. "You're going to call the deputy mayor's personal cell. You're going to tell him that you've arrested Police Chief Marcus Williams." For a second, the only sound in the car was the low hum of the engine. My mind tried to process the words, but they wouldn't fit. They were puzzle pieces from a different box. Police Chief Marcus Williams. It was a joke, a desperate last-ditch lie from a cornered criminal. I let out a short, sharp laugh. "Yeah, right," I snorted, meeting his gaze in the rearview mirror again. "And I'm the Tooth Fairy. Nice try, pal. You'll have to come up with something better than that." Henderson, however, had gone completely rigid in the passenger seat. He turned slowly, his eyes wide with dawning horror, as he looked at the man in the back. "Miller," he whispered, his voice cracking. The new chief's name is Williams." "Shut up, Henderson," I snapped, my knuckles white on the steering wheel. "He's playing us. Look at him. You think the chief of police for this entire city is out for a morning stroll in some random rich neighborhood." "He said he lived here," Henderson mumbled, almost to himself. The man in the back, this Williams, remained silent. He didn't protest anymore. He didn't argue. He just watched me in the mirror with those cold, unwavering eyes. His silence was more unnerving than any threat he could have made. A tiny, icy worm of doubt began to squirm in my gut. The name. Williams. I'd seen the internal memo, of course. The old chief retired last month. The city council brought in someone new from out of state to clean house, a reformer. I'd skimmed the email, not caring about the details. All I remembered was that he was an outsider. I couldn't even picture his face. The rest of the drive to the precinct was shrouded in a thick, suffocating silence. Henderson looked like he was about to be sick. I kept my eyes fixed on the road, trying to project an aura of control, but the bravado was leaking out of me like air from a slashed tire. I could feel the chief's stare burning into the back of my head. I parked in my usual spot and got out, yanking the back door open with more force than necessary. "All right, Chief," I said, the sarcasm dripping from my voice. "Your chariot awaits." I hauled him out of the car and shoved him towards the entrance of the precinct. This was my territory, my home turf. Once inside, surrounded by my guys, this fantasy would fall apart. He'd see the booking desk, the holding cells, and the truth would come out. He'd be just another liar. We walked through the double doors, and the familiar cacophony of the morning shift washed over us. Phones ringing, keyboards clacking, cops yelling across the room. I pushed him towards the booking desk where Sergeant Kowski, a grizzled veteran with a face like a road map of bad decisions, was nursing a coffee. "Morning, Miller. What have you got for me?" Kowski grunted, not even looking up from his paper. "Got a real special one today, Frank," I said, shoving the man forward. "Claims he's the—" I never finished the sentence. Kowski looked up. His eyes widened. The styrofoam cup slipped from his fingers, spilling hot coffee all over his desk and onto the floor. He shot to his feet, his chair screeching backward. The entire bullpen seemed to go silent in a wave, one desk after another, as heads turned in our direction. "Chief?" Kowski stammered, his face draining of all color. "Chief Williams! My God, sir! What happened?" My blood turned to ice. It felt like the floor had dropped out from under me. Every cop in that room was staring, not at me, but at the cuffed man beside me. They weren't seeing a suspect. They were seeing their boss. Their expressions were a mixture of shock, confusion, and fear. Kowski fumbled for his cuff keys, his hands shaking so badly he could barely fit the key in the lock. "Miller, what in God's name did you do?" he hissed under his breath. The cuffs clicked open. Chief Williams brought his hands in front of him, slowly rubbing his wrists where the steel had bitten into his skin. He didn't look at Kowski. He didn't look at anyone else in the now silent room. He turned his head very slowly and fixed his gaze directly on me. The mild annoyance he'd shown on the street was gone. The cold fury from the car was gone. What was left was something far worse. It was an abyss, a calm, quiet, bottomless void of authority that was about to swallow me whole. He took a step towards me, his polished leather shoes making no sound on the tiled floor. He looked down at the silver badge pinned to my chest, then back up to my eyes. "Officer Miller," he said, his voice quiet but carrying to every corner of the room. "Give me your badge and your service weapon. Now." The world narrowed to the space between my eyes and his. Every sound in the bullpen faded into a dull roar, like the ocean heard from inside a seashell. My hand felt heavy, glued to my side. Give him my badge? My gun? That was the end. That was the walk of shame, the quiet packing of a cardboard box, the 15 years of my life evaporating in a cloud of humiliation. "Sir," I started, my own voice sounding alien and distant. I didn't know what I was going to say. Plead? Apologize? Try to justify the unjustifiable? "Now, officer," he repeated, his voice cutting through my paralysis like a surgeon's scalpel. There was no room for negotiation in that tone. My fingers fumbled as I unpinned my badge. The familiar weight of it in my palm now felt like a lead sinker pulling me under. I held it out to him. He didn't take it. He just nodded towards the booking desk. I placed it on the counter next to Kowski's spilled coffee, the metal clinking with a sickening finality. Then came the gun. My hand trembled as I unholstered my Glock, the weapon that had been a part of me for over a decade. I engaged the safety, ejected the magazine, and cleared the chamber with practiced movements that felt robotic and surreal. I placed the gun, the magazine, and the single ejected round on the desk beside my badge. I was disarmed. I was stripped. I was nothing. Chief Williams watched my every move. When I was done, he turned to the room full of stunned officers. "Everyone, back to work," he commanded. The spell was broken. Keyboards started clacking again. Phones were answered, but no one was working. They were all just pretending, their eyes darting towards me, the pariah at the center of the storm. "Officer Miller, Henderson, my office," he said, then turned and walked away. He didn't look back to see if we were following. He didn't have to. My legs felt like concrete blocks as I followed him down the hall. Henderson trailed behind me, looking like a ghost. The chief's office was at the end of the corridor, the one that had belonged to Old Man Hemlock for 20 years. The door was new, solid oak, with a simple brass plate that read, "M. Williams, Chief of Police." He pushed it open and held it, waiting for us to enter. The office was sparse, clean. A large desk, a city map on one wall, and 2 leather chairs facing the desk. It smelled of wood polish and fresh paint. He walked behind the desk but didn't sit. He just stood there, his hands clasped behind his back, looking at us. For a full minute he said nothing. He just let us stand there, marinating in our own terror. Finally he spoke, his voice low and controlled. "Officer Miller, you have been on the force for 15 years. You have 2 commendations for bravery and a record that, until this morning, was exemplary. So tell me, at what point in your decorated career did you decide that the Constitution was an optional guideline?" I opened my mouth, but only a dry croak came out. He continued, his gaze shifting to Henderson. "And you, Officer Henderson, you've been on the street for 6 months. You knew what your partner was doing was wrong. I saw it in your face. Why didn't you stop him? Why didn't you say something?" Henderson swallowed hard. I'm new, sir. Miller is my training officer. You were afraid," the chief finished for him. "Afraid of challenging a senior officer. Afraid of making waves. That fear is a cancer in a police department. It allows bad habits to become standard procedure." He looked back at me. "Habits like yours, Miller." He finally sat down, gesturing for us to take the chairs opposite him. It wasn't an invitation, it was a command. "This morning," he began, leaning forward, his eyes boring into me, "I was not your chief. I was a 68-year-old black man taking a walk in a nice neighborhood. My new neighborhood. I've lived there for 2 weeks, and in your eyes my very presence was a crime. You didn't see a citizen, you saw a stereotype, a caricature you've been trained, or have trained yourself to see. You weren't enforcing the law, you were enforcing your own prejudice. That makes you not just a bad cop, Miller. It makes you a danger to the very people you swore an oath to protect." The truth of his words hit me with the force of a physical blow. He wasn't yelling, he wasn't threatening. He was just laying out the facts, and the facts were damning. I saw the whole encounter flash before my eyes, but this time I saw it through his. The condescension, the aggression, the assumption of guilt. Shame, hot and acidic, burned the back of my throat. "I am recommending your termination, Officer Miller," he said calmly. My heart plummeted. "However," he continued, holding up a hand, "I'm a new chief. Firing a 15-year veteran on my 2nd week on the job for arresting me sends a message of vengeance, not justice, and I am here for justice." He leaned back in his chair. "So here is what is going to happen. You are suspended for 1 month, unpaid. During that time, you will undergo mandatory retraining in de-escalation, constitutional law, and community policing, taught by instructors I will choose personally. When you return, you will be on probation for 1 year, and you will be partnered with Officer Henderson." He turned to my now ashen-faced partner. "And Officer Henderson, you will attend the same training. Your job for the next year is to be Miller's conscience. If you see him crossing a line, you report it, directly to me. If you fail to do so, if you allow fear to silence you again, you will both be out of a job. Do you understand me?" "Yes, sir," we both mumbled in unison. "You're lucky, Miller," the chief said, his voice softening just a fraction. "You're lucky it was me you stopped this morning. The next person might not be the chief of police. They might just be a citizen who ends up hurt, or in a cell, or worse, because you couldn't see past the color of their skin. This is your one and only chance to prove you can be better. Don't waste it." He stood up, signaling the end of the meeting. "Pick up your badge and your weapon at the desk. I expect to see you both in my office in 1 month, ready to work. Now get out." We walked out of his office, the walk of shame I had dreaded transformed into something else. It wasn't the end. It was a beginning I never asked for, but one I knew, deep down, I desperately needed. As I pinned my badge back on my chest, the cold metal felt different. It felt heavier. It felt like a responsibility I had, for the first time in a long time, truly understood.